Hello, my name is Brant Hunt. My channel simply is Discerning What is True. Today is the 10th day of February 2026, and I'm going to be reading from the book Kabbalah and Exodus. This will be chapter 39 of the book, which is actually coming from the Exodus, that is the book of Exodus, chapter 32. The title is simply called Justice and Mercy. Again, this is Kabbalah and Exodus. And the author's name is, see if I can find it real quick here. His name was Zeb Ben Shimon Halevi. He's the one who wrote this particular book here. He's written quite a few books, quite honestly. He could spend quite a bit of money, but I'm able to download some of these books. And if anyone wants to know more about that, welcome to ask me, and I can give you the information. So let's try to get into the right way here to read it, which is called, the title is simply Justice and Mercy. According to the rabbinical view, the episode of the golden calf was equal to the sin of Adam, and its consequence was as great for the Israelites down the generations. Much discussion of the incident has taken place over the centuries, and while the mixed multitudes, the influence of the two Egyptian magicians, and the cunning of Satan are blamed, responsibility was always returned to the Israelites themselves for entertaining indiscipline, that is entertaining indiscipline, that is not being disciplined, and corruption. This sense of judgment explains the strictness associated with the Jewish law. However, fear of consequence was not always enough to deter, and the Israelites repeatedly forget their defection and its lesson to subsequently suffer again and again, just as the individual does when he repeatedly ignores spiritual law. The first act of teshuva, or return that Moses carried out, was the beginning of the golden calf. Now, fire is the divine element, and so the form and substance of the calf was dissolved back into the most primitive state. The ashes were then ground into fine powder and strewed upon water, which the children of Israel were then made to drink. Water is the element of formation, or the psyche, and so the Israelites had to digest psychologically what they had created, formed, and made, so as never to forget their idolatrous actions. According to tradition, many who denied worshiping the golden calf died on drinking the water. So you see that. Again, this is not literal, so just understand that. It's not literal interpretation. This is symbolically, this is esoteric. When the cleansing process began to work within them, it was too much for their corrupted system. Seeing in the individual a dishonest psychological resistance to what might be seen as a form of psychological therapy can choke with lies, the possibility of repentance, and therefore the vitality of the psyche. This can cause the cessation of growth for that life. In other words, prevent growth. After this incident, Moses then turned to Aaron and interrogated him closely as to his reasons for allowing the calf incident to happen. Aaron explained how the people were anxious for any action in their boredom or of waiting. The most agitated had come to him, demanding that he should make them a god, which would, and this God is a lower G, which would go before them, because Moses was no longer with them. Aaron then told how he had tried to offset any such action by the ornament device, hoping Moses would return in time. This had delayed events, but he had finally been unable to stop the making of the calf, even though he tried to generate a sense of shame in them. Such a reproach, however, had the opposite effect, Everything suddenly became perverse. Moses listened to all this and then issued the following edict to the Israelites. Quote, this is pretty key here. Who is on the Lord's side? Let him come unto me. End quote. At this, all the men of his own tribe of Levi gathered around him. Then he made judges on his own responsibility. At the individual level, we see here the self-analysis after a orgy of indiscipline and dissipation. Introgation of the responsible elements of the psyche helps us to identify the causes of the trouble. So this is all, again, within yourself, so to speak. This is not outside yourself. And all this story is not a literal story, as I've said many times here. People buy into this and they think that all these people were destroyed. You know, they put into a chasm, so to speak, if you recall that story. Interrogation of the responsible elements of the psyche helps to identify the causes of the trouble. When these have been located, they have to be severely dealt with, or the balance and health of the psyche as a whole is threatened. This is done by the sephirah of judgment in the psyche, represented by the appointed Levites who carry out the chastisement of Israel. In the action described in the scriptures, brother kills brother, and neighbor is his neighbor. That is, those interrelated aspects of the psyche that cause the trouble, such as certain negating attitudes born of destructive thoughts and feelings. The Levites in this operation act as the executioners of severity under obedience, discipline, and loyalty to the overall aim of Moses, who is the only factor within the situation to perceive what has to be done objectively and without hesitation. This is the quality of Tipharel, the set or the seat of what we call of Solomon. Remember, Solomon is not a real person, folks. Neither is David. None of these characters are real. You've been taught that, and that's a great stumbling block for most people, in fact, all people who grow up in the church. They do not see the esoteric perspective. All they do is see the exoteric, which is the outside portion, not the inner. Seen historically, the killing of 3,000 people seems brutal and uncompromising, but we must remember this is both an account of crisis within a nation and its individual at its most decisive point in their evolution. Now, I'm going to say something here. You may not, some of the things we've talked about, me and Phil have talked about, which is always critical in what the Jewish writings are. Each letter of the Jewish alphabet represents a number. And I don't remember all the numbers, okay? So they represent, 10, 1, 2, that type of thing. But you'll notice that simply almost all scripture is, there's a round number, which kind of is everywhere, you see. Like, for example, 1,000 years of reign during the book of Revelation. Okay, well, that's an even number. Or there's the enemy of the camp. There's, for example, maybe just say 5,000. Why is it always a round number? We know that can't be true. If it's even literal, why did it go down? Because it's something there significant trying to share with you also. And I've talked about this before, and also Phil Langdon shared about it also. So the killing of 3,000 people seemed brutal and uncompromising, but we must remember this is both an account of crisis within a nation and an individual at a most decisive point in their evolution. Now, you also could say simply is if you're reading it literal here, you can see that basically in your own mind, where's the grace of God? Well, there's grace of God is here, but no one even asked that deal. This is They don't ask, why is this happening? Why is there 3,000 people? Why is so-and-so have to keep his arms up? I forgot who. It's a battle going on, Israel, such and such, and had to keep his hands up. In fact, he had one man on one side, another man on the other side. And I can't remember who the guy was. It was a prophet in the Old Testament. But if his hands started coming down, Israel began to lose the battle. Okay. So there were two people there, one on each side, keeping his arm up. Nation, let's see where we go. Severity in such a dangerous situation is sometimes the only way to alter a course of self-destruction and unblock the flow of progress impeded by habits and reactions resistant to change. Yeah, this to unblock that, you see. When perceived in the long view, the severe application of discipline, another quality of judgment, is seen to balance excessive mercy or tolerance towards evil and chaos, which can result in the loss of everything worked for and even death. Many people, when confronted with a deadly habit like excessive drink, often accept a strict regime of abstinence as their only way to avoid the inevitable result of becoming alcoholic. In spiritual matters, the discipline is deeper and more stringent because the realm of the results of a misdemeanor can affect several lives. Here it might be useful to consider the biblical understanding of justice and mercy. Here we go with the two pillars. Remember, there are three pillars, one in the middle, and then outward on the left and to the right. While the Old Testament contains much violence, it must be recalled that its base is the history of a people who, like the Americans, fought with native populations and among themselves. However, because there is a spiritual dimension, the conflicts optimize the struggle between good and evil within and between individual and nations. So let's recall here again, there are no hostiles here. Okay, this is all going on as he's sharing here. He's between good and evil, which is within you. You see, I think I explained this the other day to someone. You have free will. You've always had free will. Okay, so you can choose to do good or evil. Okay. There is a teachings that has become popular today, which is part of the Christian church, which says they're part of the elect. So this is a literal interpretation of what John Calvin speaks. And he says there are some people who are, he spoke this, he said this long ago, back in the 1500s, to do with that those who who are not chosen or elect, God chooses for them to, quote unquote, be damned. That's not true. That's bullshit. Okay, but that's how Calvin looked at things because we know that he did some terrible thing. He killed a particular person. He may not have been the one who set the fire. We don't know that, but the city council gave their affirmation to what he was asking for. And I've done a video on this long ago. It's been probably 6, 7, 8 years ago, long ago, about this, and I just don't remember the name. But the guy was from Spain, came through France, which is hostile territory at that time, because in Spain was probably also Catholic territory, also, and also France. Came through France and trying to get to Calvin, thinking that Calvin was an open-minded person in that regard. And sadly, he was mistaken. And so, but this is all taking place within someone here. So there's no one getting killed here, so to speak. Okay. The 3,000 people, such and such. That's what we have to understand simply is that, but the idea simply is that God looks at man as though he's a worm, when in reality that's part of his creation. That's a slap in God's face. Okay. Now, we can say also, we can go in a little bit further here, but we know that the creator is not God. That's true. And this is where the English interpretation of the Bible is made a critical mistake. It's what I understand, what Phil has shared with me, and it makes sense. The creator is the devil, you see. And it's not that God made a mistake. That's another thing that people think, because this is how they get all confused. And unfortunately, the church has not helped it. So when they see God created in Genesis, they always think it's God, but it's not. Those who interpret the Bible long ago chose to use that instead of creator. They did not become very thorough in their expositions of looking at the scriptures and the words, and they chose to use God instead of creator. And that's another person. And they do explain some of this later on, why there is imperfection, so to speak. Of course, there's imperfection because it was a creator. Me and Phil went through this, and it's a long time ago also. I'm trying to think how to explain a little bit better. And Phil gave the illusion of what we call the left side of your brain, which tends to look at everything logical and cold, is what the creator created. Instead of the right side, which is the one that has a heart and a feeling and love. That's the reason why the illustration with women tend to be not all right, they're not all on the right brain too. Don't get me wrong. It can be a woman who is logical, but that sometimes is a stumbling block, especially for that. But the illustration I'm trying to explain is simply is that the feminine mind is more in touch with its heart, so to speak, than the masculine mind tends to be more in touch with its head, so to speak. But it's also to do with what I call the right side of your brain and your left side, which we've gone in a little bit in the past, which is called Sodom and Gomorrah in the Bible. It has nothing to do with a place. It's actually everything is a lot of times is going on up here. You see, not out there. You see. Hope I made a good way of explaining that. There is, however, in contrast to these episodes of severity, much of the Old Testament as Talmudic commentary that is concerned with mercy. Consider Joseph's forgiveness of his brothers and David's relationship with Saul. Correct. Moreover, in spite of the injunction of an eye for eye, few people were executed by the rabbinical judicial in ancient times without conclusive evidence. The presence of wisdom, understanding, knowledge, and mercy is certainly borne out by most of the material in the Bible. Indeed, it would never have been accepted as sacred if it did not contain the element of love to balance justice. The 23rd Psalm illustrates this balance well. Seen from Kabbalistic viewpoint, what appears in the short term to be severe in the long run invariably turns out to be an act of mercy, as each quality is balanced by the other when perceived in terms of the separate tree. Thus, while a man may cause suffering to another, they will both receive their reward and punishment. If not immediately, then later, perhaps in the next life, when their positions may be reversed to give them a chance to resolve that problem. Out of justice comes mercy. The lesson of the golden calf was not to be wasted. On the day after the slaughter, Moses said, quote, "You have sinned, a great sin, and now I will go up unto the Lord. Perhaps I shall make atonement for your sin," end quote. Moses had left a repentant people below to ponder their situation. while he ascended once more towards the place of God. Now that's very clear. Okay. As we look here, atonement or at one-ment, you see, part of atonement is to be at one-ment, meaning single-minded, no longer in duality, but at one-ment for your sin. And he left the repentant people below to ponder their situation while he went back up to the cloud, to the mountain. You see, these are allegories once more towards the place of God, because that's where God resides, within Moses' head, you see. And these are stories. They're not nothing more than that. But they're relaying, the simple-minded will see this as simply as, this is all literal, when reality is simply is not. You have a cosmic killjoy then, don't you? If God does all these type of things, right? Like sure. So we're going to stop here at this moment. That's the end of the chapter. Well, not quite. So I'm going to show you. I can't show you this map. I'm going to describe it to you. Because this is an interesting map. This is a route of Exodus. The exact route of the Israelites is unknown, but the names of the significant places on the way reveal much. Shur, S-H-U-R, means to, quote, go about, end quote, or lie in wait. Okay, that means to stop. So go about means moving. Lie in wait means to stop and consider. Ethan means desolation. March, quote, bitterness and misfortune, end quote. Elam means trees and sin, a place of mud, passion, and conflict. Rephaim is a place of rest. Sinai is a high cliff, and Raven, or ravine, I should say. Paran, P-A-R-A-N, means, quote, caves. Lurking and searching, while Ezerim, Geber, G-E-B-E-R, means backbone. Zin, Z-I-N, is a place of protection and sharp thorn, end quote. And Kadesh Barnea, where the Israelites spent most of their time, means, quote, doom wandering, end quote. Now, this might be explaining how, maybe be a good question sometime to ask Phil, is maybe an illustration, maybe. Is this to do with the mind also, instead of a place on the property, so to speak, on land? So each part here is revealing where they go at, okay? And it's kind of what we call the map, part of Saudi Arabia today, and all the way up to Syria, so to speak, and the Jordan. And the first place they go is what we call the land of Goshen, and it's called Pithom, P-I-T-H-O-M. And I probably think I don't know if it's in here. It probably might be in here. I'm not going to go through all of them. I actually would, because it makes videos are longer. The next one is called, they again begin to roam, but they first roam a little bit in the wilderness of Shur, H-H-U-R. They go to a couple places before to get there, which is called S-U-K-K-O-T. The next place is called Edom, E-T-H-A-M. They then go through the wilderness of Edom, their trek. Then they go to the side part near the Red Sea, all along this near the Red Sea, but not quite on the Red Sea. The march, Marah, M-A-R-A-H, then to Elam, is further down. Then it's called the wilderness of Sin. And then we've already heard this word Rephidim, which is where the wilderness of Sin was located. The trek continues on, and then near what we call Mount Sinai is at the end of the peninsula, is what they're showing. I don't know if it's true or not. I'm just sharing this right now, just to give you an idea. Then they go into another wilderness called Sinai, the wilderness of Sinai. And they continue to trek upward back and to come close to the wilderness of Paran, Paran. They also go through a place called Ezon, Ezion, Geba, Geber, and eventually wander back, or actually, wander back to Kadesh Barnea, or the wilderness of Zin, Zin, and they counterclockwise. Then they go back to Ezra, Geber, and then back outward towards Edom. Eventually, they get to Canaan. They go by the Dead Sea, as it's called today, Moab, and they go to Canaan, I should say, and then they're where the Jordan River is, and then what they call last successive time places, Succom, Succom, and that's near the Jordan River. But that was the route that they took, so I just thought I'd share that. So we'll stop there. That was it. That was chapter 39 of the book. But still, this is coming from chapter 32 of this particular book, which makes it long. Okay, so thank you for being here. Hope this helps you to understand a little bit more deeply what's going on. Again, this is Kabbalah and Exodus, chapter 39, Justice and Mercy. Wish you a good day. Take care.